Moving on, I want to call up Michelle Farrell, Senior Operations Officer, Business Buildings IFC. She will be moderating our next discussion where we talk about ahead of the curve, how IFC's country advisors and economists prepare markets for climate and financial resilience.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me again to the stage today. And what I wanted to bring to API was a bit of discussion about our group at IFC that people know very little about, which is called the Country Advisory and Economics Team. Now, the Country Advisory and Economics Team actually approaches our market challenges, one of which is green buildings and resilient buildings. And how do they approach it from an economic and systematic perspective rather than just a technical or sectorial lens? And this is very much where I'm coming from the real estate side. But how do we do it if we're coming from the economic side to make a demand for these? So I want to ask first Abir, and she's coming here from Jordan today. Now, can you explain what IFC's Country Advisory and Economics, or CAE, team does, and how we create a market for green buildings?
Thank you, Michelle. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me today, and my colleagues as well, Sakshi and Reshma. So all of us, we come from the IFC advisory part, what we call CAE, as Michelle introduced it. Now, I think everyone is aware or knowledgeable of IFC's investment mandate, which is really the core mandate of IFC. What people mostly don't know is that we have a whole suite of advisory operations that actually support and enable those investments. Part of that advisory goes to our clients in the private sector. That's our firm-level advisory. However, the CAE team, which we represent a very small portion of, it's actually our government-facing advisory arm. That's how I would like to put it, to make it simple. So what we do is that we work on reforms that would prepare and enable the attraction of private investments. So we create markets, we create new markets, we improve existing markets. And by that, I mean that we work at either sector level or the national level to make the business environment more conducive. So we reduce unnecessary costs to the private sector coming from the regulations, for instance. We help governments make the business environment more transparent, more predictable for investors, help make it, a more level playing field for the private sector, and so on and so forth. So this is generally, the purpose of our work. Once we do that, we make the conditions conducive to bring the private investors into the picture. So as I mentioned, our counterparts are mostly governments, but we also work, in a holistic approach, like a 360 approach, with governments, with the private sector, with NGOs, associations, the academia, the financial sector as well as a very key counterpart and stakeholder in our operations. Now, what do we offer? Or how do we do it? We do it through diagnostics. So we carry out diagnostics of legal, institutional, market conditions. We analyze, laws and regulations that regulate private sector operations and financial sector as well. We do that also by supporting governments and regulators design and implement reforms. We bring global expertise. We have access to, we have a whole team of global experts in the different disciplines and sectors that are based mostly in Washington, D.C., in our headquarters, but also in the regions. We also facilitate public-private dialogue. We are a convening power that can bring the different views together and help reach, consensus through advocacy and dialogue. So that's generally what we do. Climate is one key topic that we look at. Entrepreneurship, investment climate, access to finance, financial inclusion, gender, all these are different topics that we look at when investment policy and promotion, I should also mention that. So let me stop here. I could talk forever about what we do, so let me maybe stop here and pass it back to you, Michelle.
Of course, and really coming from someone who's on the building side, who's on the real estate side, I didn't really understand how to look at it from this different perspective, right? What if I wasn't an expert, and what if I was more of an economics expert, and I was given this challenge of real estate and making it more sustainable and more resilient to the environment. So again, we have people from Pakistan, Jordan, and Uzbekistan. And let's go to Uzbekistan, where we went from basically no green buildings in the country to now having multiple certifications and really a big pipeline for investment. And IFC is not going to go in and start investing unless people can follow us and do the same thing in a successful way we have. So can you explain, as Uzbekistan has been going under rapid transformation, what barriers you identified and how did you work with both the government and private sector to address them? And what was the successful story that came out of that?
Thanks so much, Michelle, and hi everyone. Glad to be here. And I'd love to share the experience of Uzbekistan. So when we started 2 years ago, this was a really nascent market. So I think all we had was perhaps barriers and very few things that were probably working for us. So this was a market where, when we did the market study, had about 5 buildings that had been certified green. And that too, they were the higher end hotels, or, you know, where you're really trying to attract, rich clientele, luxury clientele. At the same time, Uzbekistan has a rapidly growing population, and almost 50% of the country is now living in urban areas. So the construction sector was really growing very well, which also meant that there was a big potential market for green buildings. But 2 years ago, there was very little understanding of what is green, what is a green building, and so on. All I think we had at that time was an understanding by the various stakeholders that something needs to be done. So the winter of 2022-2023, their energy systems, I think for a couple of days literally went down, and that's when even the government was jolted out, when people at the peak of winters did not have any heating during those days. And that literally spurred them. And what we sort of got to latch on was that will to make a change, and so that something like that doesn't happen again. Now, in terms of barriers, and I'm linking it also to your first question of what we do, how do we create a market? So you need government will, you need policies that will help the market develop and also invite the private sector. You need a lot of capacity building, starting from understanding what is a green building, for instance. How does it tie into the country's climate, pledges like the NDCs? The government, the builders, the private sector, the educational institutions, at that point, nobody knew anything. So we started working, one, on the policy level, trying to see how to have a framework for green buildings. The World Bank at the same time introduced a green taxonomy, which was very important for, let's say, the financiers or bankers to do this. And then we started working on the capacity building side. So we, one was awareness workshops, but we also tied up with educational institutions where we introduced courses developed by the IFC so that we are developing the next level of architects who can design green. So we introduced this course in 2 buildings. But when the market grows and you want to have auditors, you don't have any local auditors, right? And cost could be a prohibitive thing. So we also started to do trainings in for edge experts. So now from 0, we have about 11 edge experts in the country. So it is actually about developing the entire ecosystem, the policies, the private sector, and then finally you'll see that the money starts to come in, which is when the private sector can grow. So I'll stop here. The success story, the last part of your question, today in 2 years, like I said, we have about 11 edge experts. We have around 50 buildings that have been edge certified from 0 2 years ago, about 90,000 square meter, which is not much, but still for a country which has literally started from scratch, I think that's a great number to have. I'll stop here. Thanks.
Great, and I think that that's showing, I see some architects in the room here, and we're so into going, and I'm also an architect, you want to pitch the good story, you want to pitch the value add for your specific proposal. But in this case, having moved from the commercial sector to development, I actually see that putting in this upfront work way before the project, 1 to 2 years before it, actually is going to translate into more business. And I never recognized this in the commercial sector. And that groundwork that IFC lays down creates the customers of tomorrow, right? And these things that we almost think is philanthropic are not necessarily that. They're building those customers for you in a year or two, and you become the respective voice in the market. So another example I want to turn to is Pakistan. You know, Pakistan has a complex and evolving market. Now, what strategies did you learn to align the economic incentives with climate resilience in the building sector, and an example of what you've done there that's worked for you?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I would go to your question and start with the Pakistan as a complex in terms of you can imagine every type of complexity in Pakistan, let alone the climate catastrophe right now happening in Pakistan. I don't know how many of you are following. The entire country is literally under floods. We have lost our food basket. Almost 780,000 houses have been alone destroyed during recent floods in last 3 months. So this is another level of, I would say, challenge, let alone on the other side, economic perspective, if you see, energy prices have tripled up. So in last 3 years, the energy prices have gone up 300%. So that's another challenge Pakistan is facing, water scarcity. So there are a lot of challenges in terms of climate, economic, resilience perspective. And I think I'm sitting amongst the builders or architects or, the professional community. The same question they ask, how do we rebuild? How do we invest? What are the new techniques? And like my colleague said, this is a whole 360-degree angle where IFC comes in. We not only work with the government to help them design the right kind of a policy. So for example, Pakistan has just issued its first green buildings codes ever in last 70 years. Last 2 weeks back, we have recently been able to issue that code. But then the implementation, how do they implement those codes? And how do we incentivize professionals, developers, community through those incentives? So IFC is working with the developer community, with engineers, with architects, with contractors, construction industry, alongside the value chain market, because when we talk about how to incentivize them, the entire materials value chain comes into a play. We do not have sustainable material available in the country, and if we export from the outside, it's much more expensive. So doing that sort of a conversation, a dialogue, taking the private sector voices to government to translate it into a policy measure, help them incentivize, and to then get it implemented through capacity building, through training, and through being an IFC, through bringing investments, not just IFC's own investment, but mobilizing investment. So for example, I would give you a success story, which is going to happen very soon, inshallah. We are working with one of the largest development REITs in the country, where we are not just doing a capacity building with their architects, with their design team, how to build resilient homes and green homes, utilizing the local material. So this is one part, but on the other part, we are also helping them to mobilize investments, because this is one of the challenge being in the third world country, that investments, attraction, and finding a right sponsor is a very big issue. Then we are also convincing these developers to certify their stocks, because if you want to raise green finance or climate finance internationally, you'll have to have a certified stocks available. So we are on the path, and in last 1 month, I would say 4 projects have been certified. Because this is a very nascent market. Pakistan has just started through Green Buildings program in just 1 month. And I think a lot to be done, where we need to see how we can create a full value chain on the material side specifically, alongside the code development. I'll stop here.
And that's exactly it. And I think this is so much of this, and we call these specific development words. We say capacity building, we say upstream work. But really what we're doing, instead of marketing at the moment of sale or the moment of transaction, we're doing work before. We're working with the universities. We're working with these groups to build our reputation. So now for the final question, looking across your experiences and having become what I consider now green building experts, and we've transformed you into that through this program, what was the most, effective tool that you have used so far in the market? So let me start with Abir and then Sakshi and then to Reshma, please.
So I think, speaking about Jordan, which I cover right now in green buildings, I think when we started, we had similar challenges and we used also similar solutions to what Pakistan and Uzbekistan did, of course, by tailoring them to the context, the local context. I think what we saw at the beginning is that, so we spoke to developers, we spoke to policymakers, we spoke to the private sector like hotels, hospitals, etc. Everyone was waiting for the other party to move. Like we speak to the private sector, they say, oh, but yeah, we are interested in green building, but we don't see any government policies or incentives that enable us. So we go to the regulators and they say, okay, we offered incentives for 10 years, but nobody approached us to benefit from them. You go to the banks to ask, okay, are you interested in green finance or green building finance? They say again, yes, but there is no pipeline. So it's really, a cycle. No, everyone is waiting and it's like chicken or egg question. So how do we start? Who goes first? My answer, everyone has to move together. So that is why we designed these market creating initiatives that look at it from a holistic approach so that we can, move all pieces of this puzzle all together. In Jordan in particular, I just want to add that initially those incentives that we had in place were only available to the Jordanian National Green Building Certificate. It's a voluntary certification. But they were not recognizing international certificates like LEED or EDGE. And that was really limiting to the market because you're limiting the options that people or builders can actually pursue. So one key change that we are now advocating for is to open up the market. It's okay, we should encompass all those options. Every certificate has its own benefits, its own pros and cons, and the builder should really choose what suits them rather than the policymaker deciding in advance for them what to choose. And then my last point is I think connecting the dots and the convening power that we have as IFC by bringing all these different views together and thinking collectively how to address those concerns, where the weaknesses are, and how to reach, strike a balance between the interests and the concerns of each party that is involved in this. So I'll stop here.
Yeah, thanks. So actually, we are from different countries and we didn't discuss our response, but I think what she said applies very well to what I'm also going to say. Again, as I mentioned, Uzbekistan was a nascent market, everyone scattered. So there was no sector, people didn't come together. And the same thing is what we encountered, but they are not doing this, but the developers are not doing the homes. How do we finance? So because you talked about tool, what we decided to do last year was to do a green building forum, which is where we brought together everybody so that we can all talk about all the issues, whether it is the policy, so the policy makers can hear what, let's say, the private sector is finding an issue, or the financiers can listen to the developers and see, oh, where are they going? So I found that bringing everyone together, so, you're talking about networking events, I'm talking about something very similar, is to bring together, have a dialogue, which is when we know who's doing what. And that we could see that actually impacting the dialogue within the government circles as well, or actually finding its way trickling through into government policies. So this was done last year in October, November. By January, we did see some trickle-down effect. Obviously, not only because of the forum, but yes, that had a very big impact. So it's very important, I think, to bring the stakeholders together. And from whatever I've seen of markets or new markets developing, what I have noticed is that the initial beginning would be slow. The buyers would be fewer, the people who are buying in, but then you reach a tipping point. After that tipping point, the market completely opens up. There are service providers, there are buyers, everybody comes in. So I think what we are trying to do is get to that tipping point, perhaps getting 15-20% of the market, do what we are looking at, and that's when we would reach the tipping point, after which we won't be needed at all. So over to you, Reshma.
So I'm not going to repeat what my two colleagues said. This is exactly same for, I guess, all of the countries who are struggling in this space. But I would say one change element which I thought thought was very impactful was awareness raising, specifically for builders. Because when you talk to builders, and ask them to develop a green building or start constructing green, there are multiple misconceptions. The first misconception is it's going to cost us more. So how do we strategize that? And we've been like talking to developers, builders, even banking sector, that what new innovation can bring you in the market, and how do you go back to the passive measures, which we used to do it like several years back. So how to do design passively, how to build in, because we are now so much tuned to do a very stylish new type of, construction, that we forgot about what passive designs we used to do it 100 years ago. So how do we rethink again and clear that sort of a misconception, and then think about the innovation in the market, innovation in terms of even in the product lines. We were talking to the banks and they were like, oh, if we will start developing our product, they were only stuck with the mortgages, housing sector. And when we talked to them, we said, when you think about construction, think about the entire real estate portfolio. So for IFC, that's sort of a misconception, and creating awareness brings a lot of, I would say, bring a lot of change. And we, as a IFC team, we always pride to cite an example. I would not cite an example from Pakistan right now, but Colombia. Colombia has seen that change where green building uptake has been really fast. And that's also giving a business opportunity for developers, because developers would always ask us, what's in there for me, right? How much I would make money? What's the cost? So how do you incentivize them? It's one area. And in terms of Pakistan, we have seen this, Pakistan has seen this change into energy efficiency, where solarization has boomed in last 4 years. So 2021, it was 4%. 2025, we have solarization of 25%. And the only change in the market is to see what benefit developers would get, how banks can open up their product lines, what new innovation you can bring into the market. So I think that sort of a new thinking or clearing misconceptions have also bring the impact for us.
Okay, so just to close, I would say to the commercial developers and people in the audience, opening the market for many does not bring your competition to the table to beat you. It makes you a leader in the market, right? And if you go together, if you break down these barriers, you're seen and respected in a different way. And I would encourage the commercial companies to look at this as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle and panelists. I've been here since 7 a.m. and I feel like I've traveled to 1 million different countries. It's amazing to have so many valuable on-the-ground insights in one space in such a short period of time.